part of being a tech leader means that you have the trust of the people you work with, and part of the trust derives from an understanding of the context in a way that is concrete enough and exact enough to build that trust and to make good decisions.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley, in partnership with LomiTech, and sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, and Birthright Excel, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Welcome to another episode of 20-Minute Leaders. Today, I am with Yotam Manor, R&D Manager of Versatile. Yotam, 33 years old, lives in Tel Aviv with his wife Hili and their 6-month-old baby boy Carmel. He's an 8200 alumni and a Hebrew University graduate in philosophy, politics, and economics, and is self-trained as a software engineer. An experienced tech leader combining expertise in software, data, product, and people, Yotam was until recently the head of engineering at Trellis.ai, and not too long ago joined Versatile as an R&D manager. He volunteers for almost a decade in the Civic-tech NGO, the Public Knowledge Workshop, and is an open source project leader and board chairman, among other roles. Yotam Manor, welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. How are you today?
I'm doing good, excited to be here. We've had a few backs and forth until we were able to schedule this meeting, so I'm very excited that we finally have this opportunity. Yeah,
I've done quite a few episodes until now, and I have to tell you a secret that some of the best episodes are those that were the hardest to schedule. So I have really high hopes and expectations for this one. Yotam, today you're an R&D manager within Versatile. You were previously head of engineering at Trellis, and lots of experience in the tech world. You didn't, from your education already, I can see that you're not the traditional, tech engineer. You also studied philosophy and psychology, and you're volunteering a lot. And so there was really a breadth of experiences that you're bringing with you besides just the engineering mindset, which I think is fascinating. And I'm excited to dive deep into that in these 20 minutes. So Yotam, we'll start off with the easiest question of them all. Who is Yotam? Who is Yotam Manor?
So easy. So I will introduce myself. So my name is Yotam Manor, and I'm 33 years old. I live in Tel Aviv with my wife Hili and our baby boy Carmel, who is 7 months old. Answering the question of who am I, is something obviously I struggle with every day, and my path has been an attempt to give answers that resonate with me on a daily basis. It's definitely been, as you've said, this path has led me to various paths. I found myself in the last few years highly engaged in tech and engineering leadership positions, but it wasn't, I think, in my stars. I did not come from a background where, I wasn't a PC kid where, it was very clear that this would be where I will end up. And through a lot of search and trial and error, I think I am now very happy with the place where I'm working in and acting in the world. So let's talk about that.
The entrance and fascination with engineering while also having those other experiences, what does that mean to you? So what draws you into the engineering world and into management positions within engineering, but also always keeping in close touch with those other verticals that we talked about?
I will start with my path to engineering, and then maybe it will tie up to the leadership aspects of it later on. So I am driven by a desire to be impactful in the way I operate in the world. I want to do. I want my actions to have some sort of lasting effect. I'm very well aware of the limitations of what a single person can do, but I still am looking to. When I go to sleep at the end of the day, I want to feel like I am trying to move the needle, making the world a better place, if we'll be cliche for a moment. And I looked at very different ways to approach that. I considered at some path earlier in life to focus on a more public policy roles, and that sort of was a major motivation in, say, studying philosophy, politics, and economics in school. It wasn't the only motivation, but was definitely there. Eventually, I ended up feeling that using technology as a force multiplier for impact at scale really resonated with the way I feel it and am enthusiastic about. So to contrast, say an educator who works with the students in their particular class may have a very deep impact on a very narrow or small amount of people, and that's very respectable and admirable. But I am looking for the breadth, and that comes with being able to operate in scale, even though the effect on each single person might be much smaller. And this, in today's world, technology is one of the main ways where you can do that. There are other ways, but definitely that. And because I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't a PC kid, but I was engaged with computers, and I have that orientation. That's where my search led me, and
That makes a lot of sense. And following the search and where you're at now and navigating through different leadership positions, tell me a little bit about leadership and engineering. I think that this is a topic that is not talked about enough. But in the world that we're at today, it's crazy how many positions are in leadership in tech companies, and how the world is moving to a place where a lot of traditional companies are operating also in the tech scene and have technology embedded within them. And I think that this is a leadership concept that people are not yet really grasping, and I'm not grasping it at all. So what is happening there, and how do you perceive your own leadership style within these organizations?
That's a great question. I think so. There are two. Let's start with what doesn't work often in many cases. One is where an engineer is good at engineering, has no orientation toward leadership, and is being promoted to leadership position because he's the best engineer, or they're the best engineer. And then you often have the worst of both worlds, where a person who's good at engineering doesn't get to do what they're good at, and at the same time they're not oriented toward the questions of leadership and are serving their teams or organizations badly, and that often ends up with tears. And that's one thing. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have the problem where technical leadership does require you to be very oriented toward technology, because there is an aspect of trust there, and there's an aspect of you need to be able to navigate the engineering questions at hand. It's not just the people question or the organization question, and you need to be able to cut through the noise and find the right solution, because in many cases, and I think that's very often the case especially in startups that are trying to thread the needle of getting to product market fit within their limited time frame where they have funding, and within the context of very intense competition. You really need, so you will have, as a leader, you have trade-offs. Okay, there are questions about trade-offs, and then the interesting part is when you understand that sometimes the trade-off is a false trade-off, and that is the key place where your skill as an engineer or as an engineering leader plays an important part. Because if you're just a leader, let's say if you would put on top of an engineering organization someone who is a very experienced, a dedicated, and empathetic leader, but it does not come from an engineering context, you would be able to help answer the question of what is the correct trade-off under a given circumstance. But you will have a hard time exposing false trade-offs, and that's something that's also very important for a tech leader. So that's where I think.
So what is the jump that, in your mind, that an engineer needs to make in order to become, to get that, understanding? It sounds like there's a lot of perspective involved, There's the ability to see, to think outside the box and to view, from a bird's eye view, what's happening and what are the different trade-offs. What does an engineer have to do in order to try and get to that place?
I think, well, you kind of said the key point, which is having an eye on the bigger picture. That's the first, one of the main difficulties you see with engineers struggling to make that step to management. It might not even be a promotion in that sense, because often you would assign an individual contributor. That an engineer is not in a leadership position is often referred to. You would still be leading a project or making a tough decision. And Andy Grove, in his book High Output Management, he refers to every knowledge worker as a manager, and I think that's a very smart insight on his behalf. So engineers are almost always, to some extent, managers, and you can see how some people get that right and some people struggle with that. And
Right.
and in that place, the untrained project manager may miss the bigger point and may lock themselves in false trade-offs that arise from purist technological ideals that are not pragmatic enough, or from not being able to navigate the organizational waters, and from lacking the perspective of what the engineer builds, how it meets the user in the end. So there's a lot of product thinking here, like how does what you're trying to deliver solve an actual problem, and all those kind of perspectives, which are non-engineering perspectives, need to come into play, and that's always that's a challenge. And yeah.
So if you're looking at your role today and your previous roles as well, obviously you're leading teams, and part of the way that an organization succeeds and becomes better is that you grow people internally into leadership positions. They're the people that know the code base the most. They know the culture. They're a part of the company, and so you want them to be the next leaders. What do you as an engineering leader have to do? Or before you go to sleep, what do you think about, as your role in helping develop these engineers within your own organization?
I guess that's where my background as an educator from youth movement it kind of springs into place. I'm always trying to think on the individual level. What would that person? How would that person grow? Like, how does that growth path for that particular person, whether it's diving in to learn a new technology and taking on a new technical responsibility, or whether it's more about being able to communicate their ideas or their frustrations better and being more effective. I'm always trying to ask that question myself, and then I engage with that person where they are, and I'm very pragmatic and, I guess, opportunistic in my approach. I would not necessarily take that person to a Tuesday meeting and say, "Here, listen, you don't communicate your anger well." But I would wait for the moment where that person would be receptive to that kind of message, and that requires a very keen eye to see when a person feels that they're doing not as good as they can, and that's the place where they're receptive for feedback. That would help them grow, and I'm always on the lookout for those kind of moments.
Right. So it sounds like where most may concern themselves a lot with how the conversation is going to go, and what are the way that you will say things, and the way that you're going to give your feedback. You're actually saying, well, there is a whole other dimension that is perhaps even more important here, which is knowing the audience, and knowing when the audience is receptive, and when to actually go and approach them because if they're not receptive, it doesn't matter what you're going to say. It's not going to go by well.
Yeah, that's true. And timing and context is almost as important. Obviously, sometimes you just need to break it to them whether they're ready or not, but that's just, it's a tool in your toolbox. And what I described is another tool in the toolbox, and you just have to keep that in mind.
What do you enjoy most about your work? You wake up every day. Where do you draw your joy and fun?
That's a great question. I like to align people. I feel that just misalignment just arise naturally in every context where there are more than one person, and definitely when you have 80 people and in hyper growth. So, so and those miscommunications just happen all the time, and they become a frustration, and they're a block on the road to success. And being able to pick up on those misalignments and just be the person who says, here, you're talking about this, but you're thinking about it from this perspective, and you're like ignoring the point, and you're talking past each other, and being the person who's able to do that, like, talk to each other about the thing and then thing work. It just it gives me a lot of joy. I also enjoy solving bugs and delivering code, etc. But I also love solving the organizational bugs. So that's why I guess I'm attracted to the more like the leadership position.
So even with that dilemma, obviously now that with managing people, it's not that trivial that you spend time also coding and pushing code to the repositories. In fact, some may even think of it as not very beneficial to the organization, because your time spent with your people and leading them is probably more impactful than the algorithm or the lines of code that you're going to contribute to the code base at that session. How do you decide how to navigate through that?
So I think, first of all, what I enjoy, it matters more on the weekends than on weekdays. And I always try to keep in mind that the decision needs to be derived from what is needed and what is best for the company. And more often than not, it means coding less. It does, but to a certain extent, because as I said in the beginning, part of being a tech leader means that you have the trust of the people you work with, and part of the trust derives from an understanding of the context in a way that is concrete enough and exact enough to build that trust and to make good decisions. And in some roles, it means, or in some contexts, it means, rolling up the sleeves and line of codes, and sometimes writing them yourself to a certain extent. But it has to be worth it for the organization, because the price is high, because my impact should be through other people, not through the keyboard, generally speaking.
Take me back to middle school, elementary school, roughly 10 years old. What really inspires you, or what really fascinates you as you roam around the world? Where does your mind take you?
So it's going to sound, it may sound a bit made up, but I am. This is completely true. I promise you. I was very fascinated since at least since first grade, with social structures. I would just, sit in class and try to analyze, who's the head boy and what does it mean to be a follower, and having an understanding of how the social map works and how it manifests in your life, and looking at the girl's structure and having no clue at all how does that work. Later in life, now I understand what I wasn't looking at correctly, but it's the sort of questions that were really fascinating to me as a kid, and so I guess it's not surprising that I still enjoy doing that part of the job today.
I love it.
I also like dinosaur. Don't get me wrong, but you're just
I'll take the social structures one. I take it and I'll believe it. And if you go today and you wake up every day and you continue your work, and it's not easy work. You have to dedicate a lot of yourself with a baby as well, and a family. Where do you draw your inspiration from? What inspires you in your day to day?
So I guess these days my main inspiration is my baby boy. Except for spending time with him is pure fun, and I get to experience a lot of love. Obviously, this is talking about the daytime, but nighttime is not as much fun as in the day. But more so, a baby is in a growth mindset like no adult can be. Every day he learns something new and faces his challenges head on. And that's really inspiring. As an adult trying to maintain that growth mindset, it's crazy inspiring.
Amazing.
Fun to
We'll
be
see.
next
We'll
to
see when we'll see when I get to experience this at some point. But there's time, so I'll take your word for it. Until then,
take your time.
What are a few words that you, your wife, your colleagues, how would they describe Yotam Manor?
So I don't know about them. I will say how I describe myself, and hopefully they will agree with me. So I would describe myself as thoughtful, pragmatic, and curious.
Thoughtful, pragmatic, and curious. Yotam, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. This was really, really interesting, and I think it was. I loved getting the deep dive into the way your mind works and how you balance being both a tech geek but also a thoughtful humanitarian and sort of an anthropologist from 10 years old, from what I gather. And so, Yotam, thank you very, very much, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. I enjoyed it so much. Glad we had
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
Yes.